Dr. Skaggs. Thank you, John Speed, for the invite, and thank you all for allowing myself and Haley, my assistant, to speak with you all today. We speak a good bit, honestly. Speak to a lot of student groups, speak to a lot of elementary schools, and I actually spoke to to a group of retired Americans this past week, and I may get into that a little bit. But what I'm going to talk about today is not necessarily green stuff, as much as I'm going to talk about sustainable philosophy, sustainability philosophy. And the slide that you see here is the Southern Miss Green Initiative branding vehicle that we use. This was developed by our marketing and PR group on campus. And we utilize the word green simply because it's very popular. In 2007, the term green was actually the most used term in the world. I determined that through Google. But green and the green stuff that you expect an administrator to stand up and talk about, recycling, bike programs, waste mitigation, cultural development, all those things evolve from sustainable philosophy, which entails thought and practice. So that's where I'm going to go. It's a little bit of a heady subject, but I did just want to sit up here and talk about all the cool stuff that Southern Miss is doing without you understanding why. The very first thing is I want you to know who is standing in front of me speaking. This will probably be the only time that you ever see me in a tie, okay? I came real close to putting one on today. I was going to put on a bow tie for you, but I didn't do it. It's not my thing, and you'll notice that I'm clean shaven there, and I don't like my face like that either. There's a couple other things. One, I'm an expat. I mean, I went to school in Europe. I got my first degree in Great Britain. And I came back and I went to Mississippi State, and then I was recruited to China, and I worked in China, and I came back to the United States, and I worked for Fortune 500 companies, and I went to Dallas Baptist University for an MBA, and came back. I'm a business person. I've worked for Fortune 500 companies until I got into higher education. And then when I got into higher education, I was a business person. I did contracts. I worked with a lot of money, and then Student Affairs said they needed somebody to handle their money. So I got sucked into Student Affairs and administration and started learning what an institution of higher education is all about. And then I started learning student programming, and I fell in love with education, fell in love with students, and that's what I'm working on now is actually degrees in education. The other two things, I am a tree hugger. I say that with pride. Not that I necessarily go and hug trees, but I understand how important the ecosystems are to humans. In other words, I love humans, and so I hug trees. Make sense? And because I love humans so much, I'm also a hippie. Now, I'm kind of a neo-hippie. I don't have long hair. I wish I did. But, and I do own a tie-dye shirt, but only one, okay? But I have an overdeveloped sense of social justice also. And then lastly, I am a business person, and that's the terms that I think on. And when I became a sustainability expert, what happened was I had to learn to take my expertise in business and my developing expertise in higher education and student affairs and begin everything with sustainable thought. And so over the course of time, through my own personal study, because there's not a lot of sustainability professionals running around Mississippi, through my own personal study, I became an expert simply by having this epiphany moment. And then lastly, what I want you to know is that I'm a father. And that's the reason I do what I do, to be honest with you. It's for these two kids. The guy on the left is Joshua, and he's sporting a mean mohawk. It's hard to see. And then on the right is Gabby. She's my little princess. And they're 6 and 3, about to be 7 and 4. So what is sustainability? Okay? You've heard green. You probably might not have ever heard of sustainability. Well, if you just looked in the dictionary, sustainability would be relating to or being a method of harvesting or using resources. That resource is not depleted. Okay? So it can be used for other generations. The term sustainability, it comes from the Brundtland Commission in 1987, which was a UN commission. And that is, the first couple of words is actually sustainable development meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So that makes a lot of sense. We're going to do what we do now, and it's going to work for us, but we're not going to do something that doesn't work for our kids or for our grandkids, right? The one that I like the best, other than mine, which we'll see next, is the Great Law of the Iroquois Confederacy. Sometimes you'll see something called seventh generation. You may go somewhere and see a roll of toilet paper that says seventh generation. It's a company that does recycled toilet paper. I buy from them. And that is, in our every deliberation, we must consider our impacts, the impact of our decisions on the next 7 generations. And if you consider a generation 30 years, that's 200 years. Now, how often do you make decisions in your everyday life thinking 200 years in the future? You don't, okay? But that's the epiphany moment of sustainability, when you have the thought of what I do now matters 200 years in the future. These are the pillars of sustainability. You have the environmental, the social, and the economic. You don't have just the environmental. In other words, the environment is green, the green stuff. The social is the hippie stuff. And the economic is the MBA stuff, okay? You cannot have a sustainable society, a sustainable institution, a sustainable organization, a sustainable government if you don't have consideration for all 3, okay? You can do this university, this institution could do all the green stuff in the world and go bankrupt. That's not sustainable. You can do all the green stuff in the world, take care of your dollars, but treat your people awful. That's not sustainable. It could be viable or bearable or even equitable, but it can't be sustainable. And sometimes you have to wrap your head around that it's all a balancing act before you truly become sustainable. Sustainability in higher education. So I get this question a lot. So what's this mean for us in higher education, for students and faculty, staff, and especially administrators? Well, the question is, are we going to be here in 2040? I wrote that last night with this institution in mind. Will Mississippi Gulf Coast Community College be here in 2040? When I get through with this presentation, you might have that answer. The administrators in here might have a better picture of that answer. My personal definition of sustainability is the strategical and operational philosophy that rests equally upon consideration of people, planet, and profit. Okay? Make sense?
Planet.
What's that?
You said people, planet.
People, planet, and profit. Meaning take. I'm sorry?
You said plant instead of planet.
Yeah, I did, didn't I? But it shows you how late that was last night. People, planet, and profit. Okay, so we got to take care of our people. We got to take care of our planet. And we got to make profits. We got to be economically sustainable also. The goal of any institution to be sustainable is that when every plan we make and every action we take begins with the tenets of sustainability, we'll truly have become a green university. That's our motto. It's actually been adopted by a couple of departments, and I'll talk about that in a second when we get to what we're doing. They make me really proud when they do that. It means those administrators are starting to get it. And there's 3 800-pound gorillas, as I like to call them, that we have to deal with as a global society. And the whole reason that we have sustainable thought, the reason we have the philosophy, the reason that we develop the thought and practice. Peak everything, resource depletion, and global climate weirding. Now, when you leave here, I don't want to anybody that sits in here right now, ever go out and say global warming again, okay? It's a misnomer. I'm not a big fan of Al Gore anyway. He's done some great work, but he kind of coined the term, and I don't think it was a very good, I think it was kind of a disservice to the movement, so. Peak everything is simply this. I want to see anybody in here, raise your hand if you've ever heard of peak oil. 1? Of course you have. Scientists, yeah. Okay, a couple of people. So we're probably going to say what? 2%, 3% of the people in here? Peak everything, peak oil is simply this. It's a finite resource. It's going to run out. And scientists can pretty much tell us when that's going to be. Okay? We've used it for a little over 100 years now, and we've used up